Come in. Welcome, everybody. Great. Okay, great. And both my Fatimas, you can hear me? We're still good on that? You there? Thumbs up? Yes. Okay. Woo-hoo! Okay. Awesome. Well, okay, you guys, I'm going to jump in because I'm actually going to talk a little bit in the beginning. And so I'm totally fine if people miss me talking. So hello, everyone. Welcome to Pathfinder's Perspective, a community of people looking for a way forward in difficult times. So if you'd like to learn more about this community and our pledge, we'll make sure to post a link for you. Okay. My name is Jess. I'm with Search for Common Ground. If you don't know, Search is the largest dedicated peacebuilding organization in the world, working to end violent conflict before, during, and after a crisis. The coolest thing about Search is that 90% of our staff are actually local to the areas that they work in. And so that's who you're gonna hear from today. We're gonna talk today to a searcher, so that's what we call our staff, and a former searcher who has started her own organization. Even though if you were once a searcher, always a searcher. So Fatima Asikira, you're still a searcher to us in our hearts, always and forever. Okay, so today's talk is Captive No More, Fighting Gender-Based Violence Amidst Boko Haram and COVID. So how insurgents and COVID are affecting women and girls, especially in northeastern Nigeria. Okay, so, but before we jump in, I actually want to give you guys a little bit of background. So we've all heard about the 276 girls who were kidnapped by the Boko Haram in 2014. But the violence actually started years before that in 2009. So since then, 37,000 civilians have been killed, 2.4 million people have been displaced, 7 million are at risk of starvation, and more than 1,000 children have been kidnapped. So Search has an established office in the area, and I've been just completely blown away by our team and what they're doing there. They have an early warning system and peace architecture framework with a network of people from all levels So at the state level, dealing with policy and military and emergency response, have local governments, so dealing with local leaders and security. And then also they have 55 community response committees made up of women and youth and all set up to really be able to protect each other. So they're trained to respond to different levels of threats, from attacks and abductions to recruitment, vulnerable areas. So Search Nigeria's programs are working with former child soldiers, working with IDP camps, so those families are displaced. Also working with security sector to train human rights. So all that to say, there's a lot of stuff going on in this region, but for here and today, we're focusing on gender. So we have our radio host, Fatima Bultu. Can you give us a wave? Fatima Bultu, there she is. And so she's here to talk about how she's engaging with women on some serious topics and amplifying women voices. We also have Fatima Asikira. Show us where you are, Asikira. So we're gonna be using last names today. And so, okay, Fatima Asikira is like one of my new heroes. She's a former youth coordinator at Search, and now she's running her own organization that's focused on women and girls. I cannot wait for you guys to hear about it. It's incredible, it's so inspirational. Both leaders grew up in this area, and now they're leading by example. So, all right, so now let's get to the stars of the show. Before we talk about your work, I actually want to hear from both of you and both of your personal experiences around this. So Bultu, will start with you. When the Boko Haram's attack started, where were you and what do you remember about it? Make sure we unmute you. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us. My name is Fatima Bultu. I work with Search for Common Ground, and I'm also a radio host based in Maiduguri, Borno State, northeast part of Nigeria. So when Boko Haram started, I was actually in Maiduguri. Fine. I wasn't working with Search then, but I was working with one organization. So one early morning like that, I woke up just like any other normal day, prepared to go to the office, and then I just heard that, wait, something has happened, like very early morning or last night. And then it was like a nightmare to us at that time because it was something new. We were not used to having bomb blasts or hearing gunshots. And it was just a sudden incident, and it occurred in a place that was very close to my house then. A police station was burnt down, which was very close to my house. It's just a walking distance. And then we were just thinking, oh, so are we like, is it like a dream or something? But then it started escalating from there. And what I can remember from that incident is that for the first time, I was just thinking, years back when I used to watch the TV and see Syria and what is happening in places like Syria and other places, like I used to think, is this true? How are these people surviving? Can I survive in such a situation? So I just found myself, is this really true? And is it happening with us like here and now? So, and then it just continued happening. And then we suddenly, like when the days go by, we just started adjusting to the situation. Like initially we were very afraid, like bomb blast, my God, bomb blast, I've never heard it except in movies. Like, so this is something that I'm just hearing for the first time and very close to my area. Like when the bomb blasts, if the bomb blasts, like it throws some like pieces of the explosive on our roof. And then we saw bullets within our compounds, like, you know, so it was like, is it really happening? So really it was a very, very frightening experience to us at that time. But then when years, days, months, years go by, we had to adjust to the situation. And then like it happened that if a bomb blast happened in an area, it will just take us few minutes. And if the area is cleared, we just walk through that area, and we don't really feel like, no, like that fright has gone. Like we're not afraid any longer. So that was actually the first thing I experienced at that time, and like seeing dead bodies slaughtered, like blasted in a bomb, like, you know, pieces of human blood. It was really terrible for us at that instance. But then with time, we survived it, and then life goes on. So that was how it happened actually initially, but then we had to survive, and then now it has become part of us.
It's unimaginable to imagine what it's like that first. Like you're talking about how frightening it is at first, and then it just becomes a part of daily life. And I can't even imagine that. How has this, how has that experience led to what you do now? Did it guide what you wanted to do with your future and with your career?
Oh yes, like actually there is no household that is not affected with this incident that has been happening for years now. So so also with my own family, like my immediate family, I've lost cousins, I've lost a lot of close members of my family, members of my community. And then others have lost their homes, they've lost their, especially women have lost their husbands. Some have been raped, some have been kidnapped, some have been abducted. So when eventually I found myself in one piece and healthy and like not directly affected, and I'm still alive, I started thinking, then how can I contribute to my community and those people that have been affected directly, especially those that have lost their homes and are living either in IDP camps or in the host communities, living with their family members or relatives. So I was just thinking, what can I do to contribute to my community? And then that was what led me to thinking more about what actually can I do? What can I do as an individual? Then when I was in the radio, I tried to create awareness on human rights, gender-based violence or domestic violence against women, and issues of rape and all the violence that happens in a security situation. These are things, and health issues that are related to especially women in the camps and even within the community. So these are few things I tried to do to alleviate a lot of sufferings from people that are living with the consequences of the insurgency. So I was still not satisfied with what I was doing, because like working in a government organization still requires a lot of resources, which we was really overstretched, and we don't really, like I don't really find a lot of resources to do what I would actually have done and reached or covered a lot of um, or people that are affected with this insurgency. So when I joined search, I was like, yes, yeah, this is what I really wanted to do. At least I have a platform where I could reach more people, and I can amplify the voices of affected people, especially women and girls. And so I am really happy now with what I'm doing, finding myself in search. I'm doing peace building activities related to the media. And yes, that's it. I'm happy.
That's awesome. That's so great to hear. And so, Fatima Asikira, so, hearing Fatima Bultu's experience, I want to hear yours. Did you have a similar experience of where were you when the attack started, and what were you feeling during that time?
I think, good afternoon, everyone. I can say I resonate very well with Fatima's experience, and for all of us living in the Northeast, in Maiduguri specifically, can relate to her narrations and can relate vividly to the situation, because at inception, we were not really thinking at it to be this huge, to be this big, and to take this long period of time. The assumption, or rather the belief, is that perhaps it's just something that happens and would just, wash away in the hands of time. But unfortunately, then it became a movement, and it became bigger than we all have thought and imagine. But of course, it's always to see in the news that there are here and there violent conflicts whereby we've seen attacks with bomb blasts, we've seen attacks with suicide bombings, we've seen attacks with guns, and then now it's just happening in our neighborhood. In fact, it's even happening just next door. So it really became a tough reality that all of us had to kind of live with, because at the initials we run away when these things do happen. We take days without coming back to our normal lives, and then it became a situation whereby it happens, and then you would ask, which direction is it happening from, so that you could quickly take the other exit and just continue with life. And this is how it gradually killed humanity, I can say, because at points in time when stuff like this do happens, and then you're even strong to that, your heart is now becoming more cold, because it's not as scary as it used to be. And it's just like, it happened again, and you're sad for 5 minutes, and then the next 5 minutes you're out and doing normal business, which is really terrible in every aspect of it. But then for me, I was young at then, and I can say Boko Haram started a long time ago, but then the attacks, the things and other things happened while I was preparing to serve. And I went for service outside of Maiduguri in another neighboring state of Kano in the northwest. There it was relatively a little bit stable, and it's not as difficult as it is in Borno, but of course, the road access between Kano to Borno, it's very difficult as at that time. And it makes it very difficult, to move back and forth in, because there could be attacks, there could be random attacks from insurgents, killing people, slaughtering people, and, all of those things. And almost at the same time, we had been faced with different difficulties of communication, because they at some point bombed all the networks. We don't have mobile networks. It's very difficult to access anybody, and then you just risk it. The roads are not safe, flights are no more coming into the states, and it became really, really bad as everyone can just imagine. So people are just surviving. People are being resilient, because that is home to a lot of us. And in most cases, we don't even have alternatives to leave Borno. So if we leave Borno, where are we going to settle? And with that thought, a lot of us had to stay back at home. But for me, that was a wake-up call. I think that that was finding opportunity in difficult. What can I do as an individual to elevate or alleviate the situation of people? What can I do? Can I make? How can I bring a lot of succor and stuff like that? And it's just started for me as just a normal neighborhood charity, collecting stuff from people and taking it to the people in need. And that was when displacement was very fresh. That was when people started leaving their communities because insurgents were taking over, and their stuff had been burnt down. There is no economic activity. So it became tough for people, especially women and children, because men at that time were just killed brutally, and some of them are abducted, and some of them forcefully recruited to insurgent movement. And for the women and children, they had no option than just to run for safety. And one time I came to Maiduguri for a break, and I heard about it, and I went to see it for myself. And when I went to one of the informal camps as at then, because IDP camps were not formally set up, and it was very fresh experience for everyone. So we are not even sure what we need to do. There was no humanitarian support yet, and nobody was coming because the conflict is still fluid, and the dynamics, of course, are not really quite understood. So when I went to one of the camps and sat with the women and had a conversation and a chat with them, the basic issue is we don't have clothes, they are not covered, their children are exposed to cold and around rainy season. So it was just a difficult moment for me. And the thought was, what do you do about this? So I mobilized clothes, used clothes. And this is also one advantage I took of my social media handle and social media influence to see how to reach out to a lot of communities, because as at then I wasn't also thinking about donor communities, about funding, because it was just not what I was really envisioning to even become in life. But this life happens, and you just have to just jump on something. And so I started with that. In that experience, I just kept researching and thinking about ways. But then one thing that struck me is, if this is going to continue, because things doesn't seem to be getting slower, and then what? So today, if I lose the capacity to do the support, then that means a lot of people who are willing to support cannot also do the supporting, because I am the only vocal person and people cannot find any way. But secondly, it's also a thing of accountability to the people that give their stuff. In most cases, they want to see where those resources go. In most cases, people hear of these things from the news, but then they want someone credible that is on ground, that they could trust with their resources and help. So that was what prompted me to start a small movement and start thinking towards an established organization. Really, as at that time, I wasn't thinking of anything huge. It was just, basically the small charity initiative that you can do and any other volunteer can do to just help. So, and that was really the start of the Borno Women Development Initiative. But one outstanding question I usually get is, why do you choose Borno, and why do you choose women? Because it's not only a women thing, and Borno seems like you're segregating other parts of Nigeria. But my choice of those is because at then we were the spotlight, Borno was the spotlight, and everything about the insurgency happens from there. And in fact, a lot of people can resonate well with the word Borno because it's out there, it's becoming a little bit popular. And one thing was also, when you go and search on the Google, at least if you write Borno and a lot of Borno things pops up, then at least Borno women could also come. And so it was just a decision that to be smart about the whole startup and the process. So yeah, that was just my experience with that.
That's amazing. And so what's so cool about both of you is that through this horrible pain and suffering that you're experiencing, you guys both stopped and said, what can I particularly do about it? And Fatima Asikira, you were like, okay, I'm just going to start collecting clothes. And now, like you said, it started as something really small. Now it's grown to something much bigger. At some point, I know this just because I've talked to you before, you decided that you wanted to gain some more skills, and so you looked to Search. So can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to come to Search and what you took away for your own organization after working there for a little bit?
Yes, so part of the challenge at that time was also the coming of international organizations, UN agencies, and then it's also an opportunity that the donor funds were available, but how do you even access it with a zero organizational structure or a startup and stuff like that? So Search for Common Ground, I was opportune to meet with a senior searcher at Lantana. I think she was a former Search staff and an inspiration. She's still my role model. I still look up to her. And then she was working with Maxwell, and they were also coming into Borno at that time. They had the youth project and we started having, was telling me about the youth project, and I was also interested to learn. And part of what I've been doing also kind of gave them excitement and wanted to see how also they can support me to build on my skills and development. And we got talking, and I got interviewed, and I got the offer because it was also a process of organizational hiring, and I got the right skill set, I can say. So with that, I came on board and I managed the youth programs as the youth programs coordinator. I managed the youth CVE project of the Lake Chad between 5 countries. And we managed to pull through young leaders working on countering violent extremism around the Lake Chad region. And we had a summit here in Maiduguri, a very big summit. I can say one of its kind here in Maiduguri. And these people, we flew from Mali, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad also all came to Maiduguri, and we did that project. But then Search gave me the opportunity as a manager, because I'm overall looking at youth programming, ensuring that youth are integrated. Whenever there is an activity, I make sure I raise the youth concern to be integrated into that. And they gave me that flexibility, really. And then I was also making a lot of linkages because of the charity work that I do, and also the social media outreach, but then also linking it with Search because Search is already established. So I get a lot of invitation to activities. I apply for programs that happens across the continent, across the globe as well. I applied for many, and I managed to also get on board. And every time I do those applications, I manage to scale through. And with the support of Search, I was able to also attend a lot of events, a lot of activities where it showcased a lot of my work. And trust me, working with Lantana and Maxwell, with Raj as well, our country director, was really an eye-opener because I had really developed a lot, and I've seen their leadership skill and how everybody in Search was just the hierarchy wasn't really rigid, everybody is a little bit easier to handle with. You can freely talk with everybody as a leader. You can take your concerns, and I'm not flattering, but I mean, that was kind of the setup I met. And I happened to also meet some colleagues at New York and DC when I went for for activity there in with search. It's a search program. Is one of my first activity with search. I was able to also be a little bit mentored by the VP. I still, her name just escaped. That's unfair. Because I still kind of hold her very dear to my heart, because she's really, really strengthened. I think one of my skills for public speaking came from her, because I kind of, she shaped the whole idea and the conversation I came with in just, 5 to 15 minutes, and it gave me a really big highlight of perspective of how I would do. So really, such is my first family. I always carry it at the back of my mind, and wherever I am, I still represent the Search family as well.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. I wasn't expecting you to go off and name drop all those amazing people at Search. So this is super cool, and I think a lot of them are watching. So that's so awesome. And now let's talk a little bit about what your organization does. So can you tell us a little bit about what your organization does, and then specifically how? Because I know that you work with, of course, you work with women and girls, and a lot of them are former captives. And so can you also talk about what you do, but also where do these girls come from and how do they come to you?
Yes, so for us, I can say we borrowed a lot of things and became more of a jack of all trades, because if you look at the industry and where funding comes, programming comes, in most times you don't find projects that are targeted specifically at women. And that has always been a problem to me, because they have been suffering a lot from time, and they are, in fact, one of the direct victims of insurgency, with abductions, with sexual violence, with economic violence, because in most cases they are left with the children. And so for me, we try as much as possible. We've opened for now a lot of different departments. We work on food security and nutrition. We work with livelihood and economic empowerment. We work on protection around sexual violence and other gender-based related violence. We work on education for opportunities with children. So those different departments do work in our organization, and we get different fundings from different donors. For example, we are currently working with WFP on food security and nutrition projects. We are working with UNHCR on protection, sexual and gender-based violence related issue. We are working with UNDP on protection as well. We are working also with Germany on protection and promoting women, peace and security. So it is a lot of different funding opportunities that do come to our organization. And one of the opportunities is also because we are women-led, we are young women-led, and we are also able to center our interventions around women and children, which is also of great advantage to many. But then working with abducted returnees and survivors of this sexual violence, abductions, and stuff like that also falls under the umbrella of protection, because you see some of them are actually liberated, and after the liberation of the communities, then they are brought back. But then also they've already spent some part of their lives with insurgents and under those rules, and it's very difficult for them because people are already aware of their whereabouts, and there's the stigma, and you cannot go back to your communities immediately to integrate back. But then also some of them are not even direct links with insurgents, but some of them are also wives and wives of the insurgents themselves. So it takes a lot of different approach and mechanisms to work with these women. Some of them would have to go through psychosocial support, stigma support, and all of this, because they need to start afresh. They're like fresh people from the community, from another planet coming back into the community, and people are still not healed because the grudges still exist. What already happened. So and then it is also to do with those of them returning back voluntarily, escaping, while some of them are even escaping as suicide bombers, and then they will come to surrender from the security perspective. So it's just a complicated situation that we have, and everyone that is perhaps liberated, perhaps escaped, perhaps rescued, as we all mention it, has different perspective and of how and what support they particularly need in there. In some of the programs, there is a success around their rehabilitation, because some of them are really genuinely not radicalized, right? Because they still don't hold the ideology, but then the circumstances had left them and kept them around such situations. So their ideas are still not as radical, and they are good to go. Perhaps they just have to deal with the community stigmatization and the process of reintegration. But the basic concern here is not even about reintegrating people, but people are still living within IDP camps. So if we are talking about process of reintegration, that means you're reintegrating these women and children back into the IDP camps with their families, and the living standard in the IDP camp, the support, and a lot of things. And currently, the donor fatigue and the funding availability, the overstretching, the conflict had took a lot of time that, all of these things were foreseen, and then the fatigue is really being real. And now even linking it to the COVID-19 situation, I mean, the funding opportunity is very, very slim. And then what is the fate of some of this, reintegration program and even livelihood for those that are living in the IDP camp already? So just a snapshot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you've brought up so many interesting things, and reintegrating women back into their communities, and it's not as simple as it seems, especially if they're going back to IDP camps, and what does that look like for them? And obviously there are all these different levels. Another difficult part about that is the stigma that these women come back to these camps with. And so, Fatima Bultu, I'm going to bring you into this a little bit, because I know that you're doing a lot of work around stigma and with the communities. And so, Bultu, would you mind talking to us a little bit about what stigma is like for these women coming back into these communities, and then how do you try to address that with your radio programs?
Okay. For us, working with such women, especially I've worked with some of the girls that have formerly been abducted on a project supported by UNICEF, the integrating children that have been formerly associated with armed groups. So some of the girls that I have worked with, it's really strange. It's all like the experiences that Fatima Asikira is talking about. These are all the things that I've been hearing from them, written some stories of some of these girls. So for particularly one girl that has been abducted and she managed to escape actually. So when I was interviewing her, her first statement was like, I was asking her, how did you feel when you were abducted and then you were with the people there in the bush? So what she told me was that actually the first few weeks, I just hoped it was better that they killed me, that I'm not alive, like instead of living with those people. Like it was so horrible for her. First of all, what she said was she's never been separated with her parents. She's never gone to anywhere. At that time, she was 13 years old, and like it was a nightmare to her. So she was like thinking, she was crying for days on end, and she was hoping that they just kill her and she's no more. It's better than this life. Because at a point in time, one of the insurgents forcefully married her, and like life was terrible for her living in the bush. So, but as the days go by, she tells her story that she managed to survive the life in the bush. Like it just became normal to her, and she just adjusted to the environment there. and she had to live with the guy that married her forcefully because there was nothing she could do about it. So, but when she saw few other girls escaped captivity at that time, so she also planned to escape, and she was successful in that, and she managed to escape. So these are some of the beneficiaries that have been given to us by UNICEF. We're trying to work with them, reintegrating them back into the community, looking at giving them psychosocial support because of the trauma they've gone through, and a lot of other things. So these are like one example of the things we see working with those girls that have actually been abducted, or some of them that have, some women that have lost their husbands, or their husbands been killed, either abducted, and they end up being in the IDP camps. So these are some of the kind of things that we see, and I think working with them, the experience I have as a radio host is that most of these girls, because of the stigma, they don't, because we tried it using different radio hosts, like to try to get to know how they open up to different, like to females and to males. Is it like the same, or, you know? So we experimented, and then we found out that they actually don't open up to the men reporters, to men, to the male gender. So when I tried to interview them, most of them opened up to me, like even during the some programs on human rights and domestic violence against women. Some women were very, very comfortable to open up with a female host than with a male host. Like some with call in, like if it is in a phone-in program, they will call in, not minding, like radio is covering a wider audience and their voices are being heard. They still open up, and I was just surprised because they don't do that if it was a male host. So using from that experience, what we did was to train more female hosts to handle such issues. Like even right now, we engage more of female radio hosts to take interviews or to deal with such issues that are related to women, because they don't like readily open up to. They even don't do that. But then if it is a female, they felt more comfortable. Like the one I interviewed, she was very, very much comfortable to like open up to me and tell me what has happened to her in the bush, and how these people married her, and then what happened, and like it was so very sensitive that otherwise they wouldn't have disclosed to the opposite gender. So that was the experience I had, and building up with on that experience, I have been engaged with a lot of I'm trying to engage a lot of female hosts to deal with anything that has to do with female women that have undergone such stigma, so that we wouldn't like cause more harm to them in trying to help them. Like they might not, they might feel worse if a male host would be asking them, how has life been with you as a female abductee, you know? So this is what we have realized, and then this is what we've been working with. Right now, I'm even working with some of the beneficiaries, like that young girl that I interviewed. she's part of the young women that I'm training as radio presenters, and she's really doing well. So that is some of the experiences that I have with some of the women that I've worked with in this situation.
That's amazing. And so, so I mean, it's heartbreaking to imagine a 13-year-old going into that situation and then coming back, and then what she faces to her community after having that horrible experience. And so, can you explain really briefly? We're going to get to questions here in a second, but can you explain really briefly about how you use radio to kind of open up the conversation with people in the community on behalf of these girls?
Oh yes. What we do as the first thing is to it is the messenger, like the person that is presenting the show. So that is the first platform that we use to make such women or girls very, very comfortable to call in, or either if we are interviewing them in person, to feel very much comfortable. And then from there, we use skills like interviewing skills and hosting skills, presentation skills, in such a way that we don't actually touch sensitive issues. So we do it so much lightly, in such a way that they themselves would now want to talk about sensitive issues that have been bothering them, because for them, it is a platform that they've been looking for. So they've been bottling up a lot of things, like most of them, or like few of them, had the opportunity to have a conversation with psychosocial specialists in a way that they could open up and discuss issues that is affecting them, so that they would feel relieved a little bit. So it's not about, most of the time in such cases, it's not even about food, it's not even about medication, but it's about the trauma and the stigma they're facing in the communities. So that is how we deal with. And another way we do is like to dramatize some of the issues that are affecting these women in such a way. We do it in two phases. We do it on the radio, and then we do it in the communities, which we call the community participatory theaters. So what we do is we take a topic like of an abducted girl coming back to the community, and then we try to see or ask a question: how would you feel if it was your daughter that has been abducted, or your wife that has been abducted, and she comes back with pregnancy, for instance, or with a child? Are you going to accept her? Then we now leave the conversation open to the people, if it is in the radio, to call in, and if it's in the community, to people, for people to participate. But then we have both sides of it, that is the positive and the negative side, because some people would actually say, no, even if she's my daughter, I'm not going to accept her back, especially with that bad blood, as they call it, bad blood. Yes, so we are not going to accept her back. But at the end of the day, in most of our programs, we end up having some people that would actually say, well, we think it is better that we accept them back. If not, the vicious cycle is going to like continue. If you don't, she's going back to the bush with that so-called bad blood, and he's going to be one of them again. And then it translates back to the community where we're living. So at the end of the day, most of the time we get people that will try to convince other members of the community, either on in the community while doing the participatory theater, or in the radio. So we have others speaking on behalf of us, like we don't have an opinion, like in the media, you don't have an opinion, you just open a floor to people to decide on them what is good for them and how they're going to solve this problem by themselves. So that is the methods that we use in the radio and also in the participatory theater done in the communities.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing about that work. It's so important because, like you're saying, it's stopping that cycle. Because then, if there's no place for them to go, they might end up going back. Okay, you guys, we're opening up for Q&A from the audience. So for those of you that had questions, and I already see that we have a question from Jared Miller, who is also a former searcher. So hi, Jared, and I'm so glad that he brought this up because we wanted to talk about this more. So from Jared, he says, "Hi, searchers. Thanks for sharing your great work and everything you're doing. I'm wondering if you can talk more about how COVID-19 has affected your work, and what are you seeing as key to going forward?" So Asikira, can you tackle this one? How is COVID affecting both your work and what you're seeing with women and girls?
I think ours is not also different from globally how COVID has affected work and especially here in the communities. We still have people living together in IDP camps, and the social distancing strategy is not much abided by. And also, we have to take a lot of prevention and precautionary measures to go into the fields to continue with our assistance. However, been quite helpful by providing PPE support for our staff and even the beneficiary at field level, however, not enough. But then what we see around here is also increase in sexual and gender-based violence related cases. Protection issues are now really going very bad, and it's been very difficult for especially women and girls. And I can say that women and girls usually are petty traders, small business owners. They also do, small things on livelihood to get access to food security and other personal things for them. But it's becoming more difficult because small businesses are not as booming as they used to be because of access to how those goods comes in and access to markets. With the total lockdown period that had devastating effects on a lot of their businesses, and now for us also makes it too because also now is the rainy season, and some of the deep locations communities are really badly accessible, and it's really difficult time, and a lot of people are facing it very difficultly, and it has affected, a lot of economic impact on people and how this is working. But one thing we see that needs to strengthen up if we really want to support the people and continue the good work that we're doing, to also see the effect reflecting on those people, is also focusing more on how we can support them get back on their livelihood initiatives and activities, and then also see how we can also support with food, because in the rainy season food is always scarce and people really need to feed to survive. So, and on protection issues, really a lot has to be done. We've seen in the recent days a lot of speaking out and a lot of advocacy going on, and I have seen the boldness in people coming out to say it. But however, we've also seen the increase in some of these violences, because now it means people have to live together, and there has not been a lot of travel, and dependency is becoming too much. So it's not just about the women, but also the men who do provide and who also have small businesses to manage their families with. So it's really as bad.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I know Search and Bultu has been doing some work too to incorporate COVID messages through their radio programs that they already have going to like raise awareness about it around hygiene and health issues. And I know Bultu talks a lot about that. But I do want to make sure I touch on some of these other questions that we have coming through. And so this could be for either one of you. So this is from Anne, and she asks, what successful initiatives are there targeting returnees and defectors from Boko Haram to reintegrate them back into their communities? So do you guys know about initiatives that are doing that have been successful? I know that Search is doing some of that work in Niger.
I will let Asikira answer that.
Okay.
She's more involved with it.
What do you think, Asikira? I know.
Well, I mean, for now, what I have seen and working with partners like the government through the Ministry of Women Affairs, and also, as you mentioned, the UNICEF championing some of those causes with collaboration with the security operators, that's the Nigerian Army. What we've seen around reintegration is that when we get returnees or those who surrendered to come back to join, they are being kept at a particular rehabilitation center where we get a lot of different actors go in to support with their initiatives and their reintegration with experts going in that. And the Ministry of Women Affairs is leading on the process, because in some cases we have a lot of women and then also children who are abducted and then who needs to be reintegrated back. So this is the strategy that is put in place. The government is really in charge of that process for now. And what they do is, I am not sure how they do the reintegration processes and what method, but it's very low key, you know, it's not being publicized, it's not being attracting people because of course also the dangers and the damages that would have on people. But I know that is the initiative, but it's not just one person, it's really a joint effort and a collaboration between CSOs, UN agencies, and also the government taking the lead on that.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Nurshina. So they ask, why do you think Boko Haram uses women and girls more in their weapon? Why do you think Boko Haram uses women and girls more as their weapon of attack? And is it because they have a hatred towards women, or do you think that there's other reasons for that?
So, in my own opinion, like, I believe it's not like they have a hatred towards women. One, the reason of for the first time, in the first place, abducting girls, it's for them to use those women for a lot of personal reasons, as the 13-year-old girl has given her own story. So they marry them forcefully. They use them as cooks. They use them, give them household chores because they wash their clothes, a lot of other things. So they are using those women for a lot of domestic issues and for personal reasons. So they don't really have, in my opinion, they don't really have hatred towards women, but they're using them for that reason. And using them as suicide bombers, as the other girl revealed, and some of them that I have interviewed have revealed, those women that they use as suicide bombers are those that are rebellious. So that was what one of them. That is another one, yes, not the one that I was talking about. So another one gave me her own story, and when she was narrating it, she said she refused to accept the person that married her as her husband. So, and she has been rebellious. So what she said was, in their own way of thinking, anybody that doesn't accept whatever rules and regulations given to them is a rebel and is supposed to be sacrificed, something like that. So those are the ones that they use as suicide bombers because they are not useful to them any longer, and then they are rebellious to their way of life, to their ideologies. So anybody that doesn't conform amongst the women that have been abducted, it's used as a suicide bomber. So that is one part of the story which I have heard, and I believe that is what makes them do that. And another thing, in my personal opinion, is because women are easier to use as suicide bombers because, like, if you see a woman, she's more innocent than using a man. Like, it would be more suspicious. So I think this is that is my personal opinion. But mainly, I think, yeah, that's the reason.
Yeah, it's strategic. Asikira, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Just a rider to her last point, because our culture and community and religion is very subtle and soft towards women. And at the inception, women are hardly being searched as men are. And when they approach, it's very easier for women, to get away with a lot of things because she's well covered and she can cover the suicide bombing without anybody suspecting or seeing when she's approaching. And the kind of attire we wear, it's all covering and not exposing. So as she mentioned, it's just a subtle way to get their message and to get their targets as easy as they could, than with opposed to the male counterpart. And if you look at it, the majority of the girls that are being used for attacks or suicide or all of this are very young girls, and it would hardly stroke a mind of any person to say this young girl is harmful or this is coming with a suicide bomb or something like that. So it's just a subtle way of getting easier things to manipulate, and also a way of using intelligence to just get across what their mission is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So another question from Rim. He said, so Rim is asking about the difference between the difficulty of reintegrating abducted women versus men. So do you see, is it harder to do one than the other, or are there stigmas really kind of, accompanying both when it comes to integrating back into society?
Well, it is really different, because for men, it's even more difficult than women, because the sympathy level for a man and a woman naturally differs, but then also at community level, because the women in most cases have a lot of reasons to be accepted and to be reintegrated, for people to reason with their situation. Because one of the loopholes you could get is that she's forcefully married to them and she was forcefully abducted, and for that reason she has been married to them before even knowing the person is a Boko Haram or not, and then they left beforehand. And sometimes for the sympathy of the community to say, she's a woman and she has, so there is this subtle spot for women to get it easier. But a man who the community knows vividly about him being part of the movement, and whether abducted at a tender age or a more grown-up age, and spent few years working on that, then it really becomes more difficult. And trust me, the radicalization and PSS process that is involved for both the women and men, you can see sometimes it's very easier to crack up the women, get them to share their experiences. And this has to do also with stereotypes, because we grow up showing our men that it's not okay to share your pains. It's not okay. You just have to be a man and suck it all up in and act like a man, like nothing happened. And a man is not allowed to cry and stuff like that, So the stereotypes are also really pushing a lot of this. And reintegration for men, I can say, is quite more difficult than that of the women, from my own experience and from what I have seen so far. But I don't know if Fatima has a rider on that.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Asikira. Yeah, it's really more difficult for the men to be reintegrated back as easily as it does for women. Like for a lot of those boys that we have worked with in on the UNICEF project, not even those that have actually participated, but even innocent victims that have been forced into these activities, or some of them that have not actually even involved in the armed activities. Maybe because even men have been abducted at a point. So some of them were victims that have been actually abducted, and in the process, in one way or the other, they've been either rescued or they escaped. So reintegrating them back into the community, it's really hard, because even though they did not actually participate and don't have that level of being Boko Haram, it's very difficult for the community to accept them back, no matter how you try hard. Like, even in our place, in our radio shows, if we try to do that, people will start saying, no, 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 they have at least been with them, so we don't trust them any longer. So like we can't accept them back. Even family members do say that, not even the larger society, but even family members sometimes don't accommodate them back. So I agree with Fatima that it is really actually more difficult for the males to be reintegrated back into the community than the females for obvious reasons.
Okay. Well, thanks you guys for sharing so much. So I'm gonna do a time check. So we're about out of time right now, but I want to finish up with a question from Shamal. And because, we've talked a lot today about a lot of the violent things that are happening in your community. But Shamal asked some of the things that you really appreciate about your community and your culture and that you're growing, that you want to share with people. So Asikira, do you want to share a little bit about what you want people to know and appreciate about your community?
Yes, I think the resilience and the energy to which people are supporting each other, especially at family level. You can see, a lot of people are catering for their families that came into Maiduguri or any other environment where it's more stable than, where they are displaced from. People have been sharing. I mean, it's not just the donor funds that keeps the people going, because you can imagine the number of IDPs and also those in the host communities and those being hosted by one relative or the other. It's been love all through, I can say, with the whole of the effects of violence, with the whole of the pains and everything. Love has still thrived, and we're still people that accommodate each other, that tolerate each other, that share the little that we have, and we're still resilient to always say yes, it's going to get better any day, someday, and we just have to keep moving. So if there's one thing really that I want people to acknowledge and appreciate our people here in for hanging in this violence and moving, is really the love and the resilience that they share with one another.
Oh my gosh. Well, you guys, I think I speak for all of us when I say that the two of you embody that. The amount of love and care and dedication that you have for the people around you is so inspiring, that when all this was going on, both of you said, what can I do about it? And you've dedicated your life to doing that. And so on behalf of all of us, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for spending time with us today to go through this and to relive it and to share your experiences and your work with us. It's absolutely phenomenal. I'm so proud to know both of you, and I'm so thankful for you guys. So for everyone that's listening, thank you for taking time today to hear the Fatimas, these incredible powerhouse women. It's been amazing. If you'd like to, I just shared the website for Fatima Asikira, so you can see her work. We have the Search for Common Ground website as well. So there's lots of ways that you can support. There's lots of ways to get involved. Please reach out. And of course, you can always join Pathfinders to make sure that you're always connected when we do different shows like this. So thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.